creeping, scratching, and moving just on the other side of the wall. These are their stories. Story 1. The Tenant Upstairs by Maya. This happened about 3 years ago. I'd just moved into this old but charming duplex. It was a 2-story place, converted from a single-family home. I had the bottom floor, and the top floor was rented out to a guy named Leo. I never saw him much. He was quiet, kept to himself, the ideal neighbor, really. Or so I thought. The setup was normal, you know? I was unpacking boxes, trying to figure out where to put my books, just settling into that new home feeling. It was peaceful. For the first couple of weeks, the only sounds from upstairs were the occasional muffled footsteps, normal neighbor stuff. Then, the first crack appeared. It was a Tuesday night. I was reading in bed when I heard a new sound, not footsteps. It was a soft, rhythmic thump. 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 It was coming from the wall right behind my headboard. It wasn't loud, but it was persistent. I remember thinking it sounded like someone gently bouncing a ball against the wall. It went on for about 10 minutes, and then stopped. I shrugged it off. Maybe Leo was doing some weird late-night workout. But it happened again the next night, and the night after that, always around 11 p.m. Thump, thump, thump. My gut started to feel a little uneasy. It was just so deliberate. I'd never heard him on the phone or watching TV or anything. Just footsteps, and now this thumping. The slow burn began. The thumping evolved. One night I heard what I can only describe as a dragging sound, like something heavy but soft was being pulled slowly across the floor above my living room. My stomach tightened. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he's moving furniture. At midnight, I'd lie in bed, my heart starting to pound, just waiting for the thumping to start. I felt really uncomfortable in my own home. I was jumping at every little creak. I finally decided I was being ridiculous. I needed to just go up there, introduce myself properly, and maybe casually ask about the noise. It was the mature thing to do. I walked upstairs, my hand feeling cold and clammy as I raised it to knock on his door. I knocked, no answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Nothing but silence from within. But as I stood there, I heard it, faintly, from inside. The soft, rhythmic thump, thump, thump. He was home. He was in there. And he was ignoring me. The confrontation happened 2 nights later. The thumping was louder, more frantic. And then it stopped abruptly. In the silence, I heard a new sound. A faint, wet, squelching noise. And then, a whisper. It was so low I almost missed it, but it was coming from the air vent in my bedroom floor. I froze, my blood turning to ice. I slowly, silently, got down on my hands and knees and put my ear to the cold metal of the vent. I heard his voice, clear as day, but it was wrong. It was a frantic, hushed monologue. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was talking to something. It's okay. It's almost over. Just a little more. They can't hear. She can't hear. And then I heard a sharp, crisp snap. It was a sound I recognized from my childhood, from my grandfather's butcher shop. The sound of a joint being separated. The flight was pure, unadulterated panic. I scrambled back from the vent, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't grab anything. I just ran. I fumbled with the lock on my front door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the knob. I burst out into the cold night air and sprinted to my car, not looking back. The aftermath was messy. I called the police from a gas station. They did a wellness check. They found Leo. He was fine, they said, a little eccentric. They found art projects made from roadkill. He was a taxidermist. a completely unlicensed, profoundly disturbed taxidermist working out of his apartment. They made him get rid of the materials. I broke my lease and moved out that weekend. But the lingering question, the thing that still haunts me, isn't the animals, it's the whispering. That night, pressed against the vent, I heard one more thing, clear as a bell, after the snap. He whispered, "Shh." The girl downstairs is listening. Story 2. The House That Breathed, by Ben. My girlfriend Chloe and I bought our first house together. It was a fixer-upper, a quaint little bungalow from the 1920s that had been on the market for a surprisingly long time. We got a great deal. The realtor said it just needed a little love. We were so excited. The first night we stayed there, before we'd even moved our furniture in, we camped out on an air mattress in the living room, dreaming about our future. The calm before the storm was perfect. We painted walls, we sanded floors. It felt like we were building our lives together in this space. It felt like ours. The inciting incident was subtle. About a week in, I was in the basement, just a damp, unfinished space, looking for the circuit breaker. As I stood there in the silence, I heard it. A soft, slow, rhythmic sound. Shh, shh. It sounded like air being let out of a tire. I checked the old furnace, the pipes, but couldn't find a source. It stopped after a minute. I mentioned it to Chloe, and we joked that the house was sighing. We called it the house's white noise. But the slow burn of escalation began. We both started hearing it at night, in bed. It wasn't just in the basement anymore. It seemed to be coming from the walls themselves. A gentle, drawn-out inhale and exhale. Shh in, shh out. It was low, but constant. We'd lie there in the dark, listening, and I could feel Chloe tense up beside me. "Do you hear that?" she'd whisper. My gut was screaming that something was extremely off about all this. It didn't feel like a mechanical sound. It felt organic. We had a false resolution. I called a HVAC technician and a plumber. They found nothing. The HVAC guy said, "Old houses make noises," and gave me a pat on the back. For a few days, we felt silly. We tried to ignore it. But the breathing didn't stop. If anything, it seemed to get closer. One night, I woke up to the sound seeming to come from directly under our bed. I felt the sense of imminent danger, of fear creeping into me. This was no longer a quirk. It felt like we were being watched and listened to by the house itself. The confrontation was the most terrifying moment of my life. It was a Friday night. The sound had been particularly loud all evening, a wet, labored breathing that seemed to emanate from the wall behind the couch. Chloe was on the verge of tears. I'd had enough. I was angry. I grabbed a claw hammer from my toolbox and, in a fit of frustration, I swung it into the drywall. I don't know what I expected to find. Pipes, wires, insulation. What I saw made me drop the hammer and stumble back. A scream caught in my throat. Behind the drywall, packed tightly between the studs, was a thick, fibrous, pinkish material. It was pulsing, slowly, rhythmically, and covering its surface were thousands of tiny, hair-like cilia, waving gently in the air, disturbed by the hole I'd made. The breathing sound was deafening now, coming directly from the exposed wall. The house wasn't making the sound. The house was the sound. The flight was a blur of pure terror. I grabbed Chloe, who was frozen in shock, and we ran out of the house in our pajamas. We didn't stop until we were in the car, speeding down the road. We called the police from a neighbor's house. They thought we were insane. The aftermath is where it gets complicated. We sold the house back to the bank at a massive loss. We never went back for our things. The official story is that we had a massive mold infestation that caused hallucinations. That's what we tell people. It's easier. But the lingering question, the one that keeps me up at night, isn't what it was. It's why. A few months after we left, I did some digging in the town archives. The land our house was built on. It was originally a cemetery, but not for people, a pet cemetery. And the first owner of our house, back in the 1920s, was a biologist. His notes, what little remain, mentioned something he called attempts at somatic recombination. I don't know what was in those walls. I don't know if it was one thing or a million things fused together. All I know is that the house was alive, and I pray every day that it didn't follow us. Story 3, The Phantom in the Pantry, by Clara. After my divorce, I needed a fresh start. I found a small, affordable ground floor apartment in a complex that was a bit dated but quiet. It was just me and my cat, Oliver. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. The apartment was a sanctuary. The calm was genuine. I enjoyed the solitude. I'd cook dinner, read a book, and the only sound was Oliver purring on my lap. The apartment had one of those old-fashioned pantries, a deep, narrow closet with wooden shelves. I kept all my canned goods and dry food in there. The inciting incident was so small I almost missed it. I was putting away groceries when I noticed a single can of corn had fallen off the shelf and rolled into the middle of the pantry floor. No big deal. Shelves were a bit uneven. But the next day, it was a box of pasta, and the day after that, a bag of rice had been torn open, its contents spilled in a neat little pile. Oliver was staring intently into the dark depths of the pantry, his tail twitching. My stomach did a little flip. Something was off. The slow burn of escalation was a masterclass in psychological torture. I started hearing sounds, not the scampering of rats, but a soft, shuffling noise, like someone gently dragging their fingers across the cardboard boxes. Then came the tapping, a light, rhythmic tap, tap, tap from inside the wall at the back of the pantry. It would always stop the moment I turned on the light. I felt really uncomfortable every time I had to get something from there. The air inside felt cold and thick and stale. I started keeping a kitchen chair propped under the pantry doorknob at night. My friend said it was probably just mice, but my gut screamed otherwise. This was deliberate. The confrontation happened on a night I was home alone with a migraine. I had all the lights off, lying on the couch. The tapping started again, but this time it was different. It was louder, more insistent, and then it changed into a slow, deliberate scratching. It was the sound of something sharp being dragged down the inside of the wooden door. I sat up, my heart hammering in my throat. I saw the doorknob to the pantry begin to jiggle. The chair I had wedged under it shifted with a sharp scrape against the tile floor. I was frozen, watching the knob twist back and forth, back and forth. Then, from behind the door, I heard a voice. It was a dry, raspy whisper, so faint I strained to hear it. It said, almost, out. The flight was pure, blind instinct. I didn't even grab my phone or my keys. I just ran, bursting out my front door into the complex courtyard, screaming for help. A neighbor called the police. The aftermath was unsatisfying. The police found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no animals in the pantry. The complex manager said it was likely settling and pipes. I broke my lease and moved out within the week. But the lingering question is what the property manager let slip when I was signing the release papers. He was annoyed, and he muttered, "You're the third tenant in 2B in 2 years." I don't know what you people expect from an old building. I never found out why the others left. I don't know what was in that pantry, scratching to get out. But I know it wasn't mice. Story 4. The Foundation by Elias. My wife Sarah and I saved for a decade to build our dream house in the country. We bought a beautiful wooded plot and oversaw every step of the construction. It was our creation. When we finally moved in, the smell of new paint and fresh timber was intoxicating. This was a house with no history, no ghosts. It was ours, from the ground up. The calm was born of pride. We'd walk around, touching the walls, marveling at our own work. The basement was unfinished, just a vast, clean concrete space where I planned to set up a workshop someday. It was solid, modern, and silent. The inciting incident came about a month after we moved in. I was in the basement looking for a toolbox when I heard a faint metallic ping. I ignored it. Probably the new hot water heater. But I heard it again a few nights later while watching TV upstairs. Ping. Then another. Ping. It was coming from below. Sarah heard it too. We joked that the house was talking to us. Our little inside joke. The slow burn was a gradual erosion of that joke. The pings became more frequent. They'd happen at all hours. I went down there with a wrench, tapping on every pipe I could find, trying to replicate the sound. I couldn't. It was a clean, high-pitched sound, like a ball-peen hammer striking a single nail. Then, the sounds changed. It was no longer just pings. We started hearing scrapes, long, slow drags across the concrete floor, directly beneath our living room. My sense of unease grew into a constant low-grade dread. This was a new house. Nothing should be down there. I felt the sense of imminent danger every time I had to go down to the basement. The air felt heavy, charged. The confrontation was a choice I made, driven by frustration and fear. I set up a motion-activated camera in the basement, pointed at the main area. I left it running for 48 hours. The first night, the audio picked up the pings and scrapes, but the video showed nothing. The second night, I reviewed the footage. My blood ran cold. At 3:17 a.m., the motion sensor triggered. The camera showed a figure, a man, pale and gaunt, dressed in dirty, tattered work clothes, crawling out from a narrow access hatch that led to the space under our porch, a space I didn't even know existed. He didn't look at the camera. He just crawled out, stood up in the middle of my basement, and walked over to the main support beam. He pulled a hammer from his belt and struck the beam once. Ping. Then he turned and crawled back into the hatch, pulling it shut behind him. The flight was a shared, silent horror. I showed Sarah the footage. We didn't say a word. We got in the car and drove to a hotel. We called the police from there. The aftermath was a nightmare. The police found the man. His name was Thomas. He was a construction worker who had gone missing from a different site months before we broke ground. He had severe schizophrenia and had been living in a makeshift camp in the woods. The access hatch was a gap in the foundation skirting he had secretly enlarged during the early phases of construction, then concealed. He had been living in the crawl space under our house for months. The pings? Him tapping on the pipes and supports? The scrapes? Him moving his few belongings around? He was harmless, they said. He was just confused. He thought it was his house. But the lingering question is one that has broken our dream. The police asked him why he kept tapping. He said, "To remind them I was here. To remind them they built their dream on top of me. We sold the house. We never finished the basement. And I will never, ever feel the same pride of ownership again." Because he was right. Story 5. The Morse Code by Jake. I moved into an old brownstone apartment on the top floor. It was a classic city place with fire escapes and thick, century-old walls. My next-door neighbor was an elderly man named Mr. Abernathy. He was a retired naval radio operator, a bit deaf, and kept to himself. We'd exchange nods in the hall. The only thing I ever heard from his apartment was the faint, constant crackle of his old shortwave radio. It was a comforting sound, a signal that someone was there. The calm was one of routine. I'd come home from work, hear the radio static through the wall, and know all was well. It was the soundtrack to my solitude. I almost found it charming. The inciting incident was the silence. I came home one Tuesday, and the static was gone. The building was dead quiet. I thought maybe he was out. But the silence persisted for 2 days. I started to feel uneasy. I knocked on his door, but there was no answer. I told myself he was visiting family, but my gut tightened. Something felt wrong. The slow burn began with the tapping. On the third night of silence, I was trying to sleep when I heard it. A faint metallic tapping coming from the wall we shared. Tap, 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 tap. It was too rhythmic to be random. It would start, last for a minute, and then stop for an hour only to start again. It was relentless. I felt really uncomfortable, lying there in the dark, listening to this secret conversation happening through the bricks. I tried to ignore it, to write it off as pipes, but the pattern was too deliberate. It felt like a message. The escalation was when I recognized the pattern. I'd done a project on Morse code in college. One sleepless night, I grabbed a pen and paper and started translating the taps. My blood ran cold. It was a single word, repeated over and over. T-R-A-P-P-E-D. Trapped. I shot out of bed. Mr. Abernathy was in there, and he was in trouble. This wasn't a paranoid fantasy. It was a distress call. The confrontation was not with a monster, but with a reality far more horrifying. I called the building superintendent and the police, telling them it was a wellness check, that I believed my neighbor had fallen. When they broke down the door, I was right behind them. The apartment was immaculate. And there was Mr. Abernathy, sitting in his armchair by the wall we shared. He had passed away days before. The coroner said it was a peaceful, natural death, but in his lap was a small metal telegraph key connected to a battery. His hand was resting on it. He had been tapping that message in the moments before he died. The police said it was a tragic coincidence, that his hand must have spasmed. The flight was internal. I didn't run. I just stood there, numb, staring at the scene. I went back to my apartment. The image burned into my mind. The aftermath is the lingering question that defines my life now. The police were satisfied, but I couldn't let it go. I did some research. I found out that the specific pattern he tapped wasn't just trapped. In old abbreviated naval Morse, it was a specific signal. I am trapped and cannot get out. They used it for submarines. He wasn't just spelling a word. He was sending a formal, professional distress call. He knew he was dying. He was alone and scared, and in his final moments, his last instinct was to use his life skill to call for help through a wall to a neighbor who almost didn't listen. I hear that tapping every night in my dreams. I don't live in that apartment anymore, but I am still trapped by the sound. The question isn't what happened to him. The question is, why did he stop tapping? And what if I had listened just one day earlier? From the secret life of a neighbor to the living breath of a house itself, from the thing scratching in the pantry to the man who built his home beneath another's, and the final, desperate code tapped through a wall. We have journeyed through 5 stories where the most familiar sounds became sources of profound terror. These accounts remind us that horror is not always a distant scream in the dark. It is the subtle disruption of the ordinary, the thump that doesn't belong, the breath that isn't yours, the scratch, the cry, the tap in the dead of night. It is the chilling realization that the walls we build for safety are not always barriers, but sometimes conduits for the things we fear the most. If you have a true original story of your own night encounter, an experience that left you questioning the nature of your reality and the safety of your own home, we invite you to share it with us. Your voice could be the one that keeps someone else awake, listening. Thank you for listening. Remember to check your locks and trust your instincts. Until next time, sleep well, if you can. The world changes after midnight. When most people are safe in their beds, there are those who work through the darkness, alone in empty buildings, driving deserted roads, watching over places that seem to hold their breath until dawn. And sometimes, in that isolation, they encounter something that reminds them just how vulnerable they really are. Welcome to Night Encounters. In this video, you will hear 3 terrifying true stories from night shift workers who experience something they can never forget. These are allegedly true accounts from people who were just trying to do their jobs until the night had other plans. Our first story comes from someone who thought they understood what it meant to work alone at night. They were wrong. Story 1. The Gas Station by Reese. This happened about 3 years ago when I was working the overnight shift at a gas station just outside of Portland. It was one of those places right off the highway, the kind that gets maybe 5 customers between midnight and 6 in the morning. Most nights I'd see truckers, the occasional insomniac buying energy drinks, and that was it. I'd been working there for about 4 months, so I was used to the isolation. I actually preferred it. No micromanaging boss breathing down my neck, no rush of customers. Just me, the fluorescent lights, and whatever podcast I felt like listening to. The pay wasn't great, but for a 22-year-old with student loans, it worked. That night started like any other. I clocked in at 11 p.m., did my opening tasks, restocked the coolers. By midnight, the place was dead quiet. The highway outside was dark, with only the occasional pair of headlights cutting through the night. Around 1:30 a.m., I was wiping down the counters when I heard the bell above the door chime. I looked up and saw a man walk in. He was probably in his late 30s, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. Nothing immediately alarming about him, but something made me take notice. Maybe it was the way he moved, too deliberately, or maybe it was just my gut. He didn't acknowledge me, didn't make eye contact. He just walked straight to the back of the store where the refrigerated section was. I went back to cleaning, but I kept glancing at the security monitor behind the counter. I could see him on camera, just standing there in front of the drinks, not moving, just standing, for maybe 2 full minutes. My stomach tightened a little. That's when I started feeling like something was off. Finally, he grabbed a bottle of water and came to the register. When he got closer, I noticed his eyes. They were completely blank, like he was looking through me rather than at me. He set the water down without a word. "That'll be $1.89, I said, trying to sound normal. He handed me a $5 bill, and when I gave him his change, his hand lingered on mine for just a second too long. My skin crawled. "You work here alone?" he asked. His voice was flat, emotionless. "No," I lied immediately. "My manager's in the back doing inventory." He stared at me for a long moment, then picked up his water and left without another word. I watched him through the window. He didn't get into a car. He just walked to the edge of the parking lot, into the darker area near the tree line, and stood there, facing the store, facing me. My heart started pounding. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that maybe his car broke down or he was waiting for someone. But every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong. I pulled out my phone and pretended to text someone, but I was really opening the emergency contacts list. I had the non-emergency police line saved. My finger hovered over it. The man didn't move. He just stood there in the shadows, and I swear I could feel him watching me even though I couldn't see his face anymore. 10 minutes passed. He didn't move. I didn't move. Then, at 2:14 a.m. exactly, I remember because I kept checking the clock, a truck pulled into the parking lot. The driver got out and headed toward the door, and the moment he did, the man in the shadows turned and walked away into the darkness. Just like that. Gone. The truck driver came in, bought cigarettes and coffee, made small talk about the weather. Normal. Everything felt normal again. When he left, I locked the door behind him and put up the "back in 15 minutes" sign, even though that was against policy. I sat in the back office with my phone in my hand, ready to call 911 if I needed to. I stayed there for 20 minutes, watching the cameras. The parking lot was empty. The man didn't come back. But at 3:47 a.m., I saw something on the monitor that made my blood run cold. The camera that faced the dumpsters at the side of the building, it showed a figure, the same man. He was behind the building now, moving along the wall, heading toward the back door. The back door that I knew I'd locked, but suddenly couldn't remember if I'd actually checked. My hands were shaking as I pulled up the phone. I didn't care if I was wrong. I didn't care if I looked paranoid. I called 911. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone lurking around my workplace. I work alone at the gas station on Highway 26, mile marker 34. He's been here for 2 hours, and now he's trying to get in through the back. My voice cracked. Stay on the line. Officers are on their way. Are you in a safe location? I'm in the office. The door locks. Stay there. Don't open the door for anyone except police. They'll be there in approximately 8 minutes. 8 minutes felt like 8 hours. I watched the monitor. The man had reached the back door. I saw the handle move. He was trying it, testing it. My heart was slamming against my rib cage so hard I thought I might pass out. Then he disappeared from the camera's view. I waited, holding my breath. Where did he go? Was he coming around to the front? Was he? The lights went out. Everything went dark except for the glow of the security monitors and my phone screen. The building's main power had been cut. I almost screamed. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep quiet, even though the logical part of my brain knew he couldn't hear me. The office door had no window. He couldn't see in, but I could hear. Footsteps. Inside the store. Slow, deliberate footsteps on the tile floor. He was inside. How? How was he inside? The doors were locked, I was sure of it. But the footsteps were real, getting closer to the office. I crouched down under the desk, phone clutched to my chest. The 911 operator was still on the line, her voice a whisper. Officers are 3 minutes away. Stay quiet. Stay hidden. The footsteps stopped right outside the office door. I could hear breathing on the other side. Heavy, patient breathing. Then the door handle rattled. Once, twice, 3 times. It was locked. Thank God it was locked. The breathing continued. He was just standing there, waiting. I was crying silently, tears streaming down my face, praying the police would get there before he found a way in. Then I heard it, the most terrifying sound of my life. His voice, calm and quiet, speaking through the door. I know you're in there. I just want to talk. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I've been so lonely, he continued. I just wanted some company. Why did you have to call the cops? My entire body was trembling. The operator was still in my ear. They're pulling into the parking lot now. Stay quiet. Suddenly, I heard shouting from outside. Police, show me your hands. The breathing on the other side of the door stopped. I heard rapid footsteps running away, the back door slamming open, more shouting, car doors, a brief chase. Then, finally, a knock on the office door. Ma'am, this is Officer Rodriguez with Portland PD. You're safe. You can come out. I couldn't move at first. My legs wouldn't work. But eventually, I unlocked the door with shaking hands. There were 3 officers there. They'd caught him trying to run into the woods behind the building. They said he had a backpack with zip ties, duct tape, and a knife inside. They said I'd done everything right by calling when I did, that my instincts had probably saved my life. The security footage showed that he'd entered through an old coal chute in the floor near the restrooms, a service entrance I didn't even know existed. The door had been welded shut years ago, but he'd pried it open sometime earlier that evening, before I'd even started my shift. He'd been planning it. I quit that night. My manager understood. The police said he'd been watching the store for weeks, waiting for a night when someone young was working alone. His name was in the news for about a week. He had a history. He'd done time for assault, and according to police, those items in his backpack weren't for talking. I never worked a night shift again. I can't. Every time I'm in a building alone after dark, I feel that same tightness in my chest, that same certainty that someone is watching me from the shadows. Sometimes I still dream about those footsteps in the dark, and that voice through the door, calm and patient, asking why I'd called the cops. I don't know what he planned to do. The police had theories, but I never wanted to hear them. Some things are better left unknown. What I do know is this: trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And if I'd ignored that feeling, if I'd convinced myself I was just being paranoid, I don't think I'd be here to tell this story. Working alone at night makes you vulnerable in ways most people never have to consider. Our next storyteller learned that the most terrifying encounters don't always come from strangers. Story 2. The Nursing Home by James. I used to work as a night orderly at a nursing home in rural Ohio. This was back in 2018, right after I graduated high school. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid decently, and I figured I was doing some good, helping people who needed care. The facility was an old building, built sometime in the 1960s. It had that institutional smell of antiseptic and old carpet, and at night, it felt even older. The hallways were long and dimly lit, with rooms lining each side. During the day, there was activity, nurses chatting, residents talking, televisions playing. But at night, after 11 p.m., It was just me and one nurse for the entire wing. My job was simple: check on residents every hour, help anyone who needed the bathroom, change bedding if necessary, and respond to call lights. Most nights were quiet. Most residents slept through the night. But there was one resident who made me uncomfortable from my very first shift. His name was Mr. Herschel, room 114. He was 87 years old, and according to his chart, he had advanced dementia. He rarely spoke during the day, mostly just stared out the window or slept. But at night, he was different. At night, he watched. I first noticed it during my midnight rounds. I'd peek into each room with my flashlight just to make sure everyone was okay. When I checked on Mr. Herschel, he was sitting up in his bed, perfectly still, staring directly at the door, at me. His eyes caught the light from my flashlight, reflecting back like an animal's. I almost jumped. "Mr. Herschel? You okay? Need anything?" I whispered. He didn't respond, didn't blink, just stared. I chalked it up to dementia. People with dementia sometimes had episodes, confusion, strange behaviors. I closed the door gently and moved on. But every night after that, it was the same thing. Midnight rounds, and there he was, sitting up, staring at the door. Always silent, always watching. It got to the point where I started to dread walking past room 114. There was something about the way he looked at me. Not confused or vacant like most dementia patients, but focused, aware, like he was studying me. I mentioned it to Sharon, the night nurse, after about a week. "Yeah, Herschel's a weird one," she said, not looking up from her paperwork. "Been like that for months. Don't let it get to you. He's harmless." "Does he ever say anything during the day?" "Not really. Sometimes mumbles." "Why?" "Just curious." I tried to brush it off, but my gut wouldn't let me. Every night, the same routine. Every night, those eyes. Then, about 3 weeks into the job, things escalated. I was doing my 2 a.m. rounds when I got to room 114. I opened the door slowly, shined my light in, and my stomach dropped. The bed was empty. Mr. Herschel wasn't there. I felt a spike of panic. Residents with dementia sometimes wandered, and if he'd gotten out of the wing, he could hurt himself. I immediately went to find Sharon. "Herschel's not in his room," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Her eyes widened. "What? Did you check the bathroom?" "Doors open, lights off. He's not there." We split up to search. I took the west hallway. She took east. I checked every common area, every bathroom, the dining room, the activity room. Nothing. My heart was pounding. We were going to have to call the police, report a missing resident. This was bad. That's when I heard Sharon's voice, shaky and strange, calling from the east hallway. "James, come here." I ran to her. She was standing outside the storage room at the very end of the hall, the door slightly ajar. She pointed inside and I looked. Mr. Herschel was standing in the storage room, in the dark, facing the corner, just standing there. "Mr. Herschel?" Sharon called out gently. "Let's get you back to bed, okay?" He didn't move, didn't respond. I stepped into the room, turned on the light. That's when I saw what he was facing. The corner had old employee photos on the wall, pictures from decades ago. Mr. Herschel was staring at one specific photo, a staff picture from 1989, and he was smiling, not a pleasant smile, something else, something that made the hair on my neck stand up. Sharon and I managed to guide him back to his room. He didn't resist, but he didn't acknowledge us either. Once he was back in bed, he just resumed his usual position, sitting up, staring at the door. "That was strange," Sharon muttered as we walked back to the nurse's station. "Has he done that before?" "Never, and I've been here 5 years." I couldn't shake the image of him standing in that dark room, smiling at an old photograph. The next night, I decided to look at that photo more closely during my break. I went to the storage room, turned on the light, and examined the staff picture from 1989. It showed about 15 employees, all in their uniforms, standing in front of the building. I scanned the faces, trying to see if I recognized anyone. Then I stopped. In the back row, third from the left, was a young man in his 20s, dark hair, thin build, wearing orderly scrubs. It was Mr. Herschel. He'd worked here years ago, before dementia took his memories. A chill ran through me. Why was he staring at this picture? Did some part of him remember? I was about to leave when I noticed something else about the photo. There was a woman standing next to young Herschel, also in scrubs. She had her hand on his shoulder, smiling. Written at the bottom of the photo, in faded ink, "Summer Staff, 1989. I took a picture of it with my phone and went back to work. But that night, during my midnight rounds, something was different. When I opened the door to room 114, Mr. Herschel wasn't sitting up. He was standing, right behind the door, inches from me. I jumped back, my heart exploding in my chest. "Jesus, Mr. Herschel, you scared me." He didn't move, just stood there, his face partially in shadow, staring down at me. He was a tall man, and this close, he seemed enormous. "Let's get you back to bed, okay?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. That's when he spoke. The first words I'd ever heard him say. "She's still here." His voice was raspy, barely audible. "Who's still here?" I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. "She never left." My skin broke out in goosebumps. "Mr. Herschel, who are you talking about?" He reached out slowly and pointed past me, down the dark hallway. I turned to look, but there was nothing there. Just the empty corridor, lit by dim emergency lights. When I turned back, Mr. Herschel had shuffled back to his bed and was lying down, eyes closed, as if nothing had happened. I stood there for a moment, my mind racing. Then I backed out of the room and closed the door. I found Sharon and told her what happened. She looked concerned but tried to rationalize it. "Dementia patients say weird things, James. He's probably remembering someone from his past. Don't read into it." But I couldn't let it go. "He used to work here. In 1989. I saw his picture." Sharon's expression changed. "He worked here?" "Yeah. There's a photo in the storage room." She was quiet for a moment, then said something that made my blood run cold. "There was a woman who worked here in the late 80s. An orderly, I think. She went missing. Just never showed up for her shift one day. Some people thought she ran away, but her car was still in the parking lot. They never found her. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me." "What was her name?" "I don't remember. It was before my time. But there are old records in the basement if you really want to dig." I didn't sleep for the rest of that shift. Every time I walked past room 114, I felt like Mr. Herschel was aware of me, even with his eyes closed. 3 nights later, during my 3 a.m. rounds, I smelled something awful near the storage room. A rotting, putrid smell that made me gag. I checked the room, but there was nothing obvious. No dead rodents, no old food, nothing. But the smell was strongest in the corner where Mr. Herschel had been standing. I got a flashlight and examined the wall more carefully. There was old paneling, some of it loose. Behind it, I could see darkness, some kind of gap in the structure. Something told me not to look. Something told me to walk away. But I didn't. I pulled at the loose panel and it came away easier than expected. Behind it was a hollow space, maybe 2 feet wide between the walls. And something was in there. I couldn't see much with my flashlight, but I saw fabric. Old, rotted fabric, and bones. I stumbled backward, dropping the flashlight, and ran to find Sharon. The police came an hour later. They pulled out the remains of a woman from that hollow space. She'd been there for decades, hidden behind the false wall. Her ID badge was still with her, corroded but readable. Her name was Linda Brennan. She'd been an orderly. She'd worked here in 1989. She was the woman standing next to young Herschel in that photograph. The investigation concluded that she'd likely been murdered and hidden by someone with access to the building during renovations that happened in 1989. They never found who did it. Too much time had passed, but I know Mr. Herschel knew. Some part of him remembered, maybe not consciously, but deep in whatever was left of his mind, he remembered Linda, and he'd been trying to tell someone. "She's still here," he'd said. "She never left." He was right. I quit 2 weeks later. I couldn't keep working there, knowing what was in those walls. Knowing that Mr. Herschel had spent decades watching, remembering something he couldn't articulate. He passed away a few months after Linda was found. I heard about it from a former co-worker. They said he seemed more peaceful in his final days. I don't work in healthcare anymore. I can't. Because sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I still think about that storage room. About Linda Brennan, hidden in the dark for 30 years. And I think about Mr. Herschel, sitting up in his bed every night, watching, waiting, trying to tell someone his terrible secret. Some part of him always knew she never left. The night shift can reveal truths that were meant to stay hidden. But sometimes, the most haunting encounters are the ones where you never learn the full truth, where questions remain unanswered. Our final story comes from someone who discovered that some mysteries are better left unsolved. Story 3. The Security Guard by Omar. I worked security at an office complex in downtown Dallas for about 1.5 years. It was a massive building, 23 floors, home to various tech companies, law firms, consulting agencies. During the day, the place was buzzing with hundreds of people. But at night, after 10 p.m., it was just me and the cleaning crew. My job was straightforward. Monitor the security cameras, do walking patrols every 2 hours, check doors, make sure everything was locked up tight. It was boring work, which was exactly what I wanted. I'd spent 6 years in the Army, seen things I didn't want to see anymore, and this quiet, predictable job was exactly what I needed to decompress. The overnight shift was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I'd arrive, relieve the evening guard, and settle into the security office on the ground floor. 12 monitors showing camera feeds from every floor, the parking garage, the entrances, the stairwells. Most of the time, I'd see nothing but empty hallways and dark offices. The cleaning crew would usually finish by midnight. After that, I was completely alone in 400,000 square feet of empty building. I'd been working there for about 6 months when I first noticed the woman. It was around 1:30 a.m., and I was doing my routine camera check, cycling through feeds, when I saw her on the monitor for the 14th floor. She was just standing in the hallway, facing away from the camera, completely still. I frowned. The cleaning crew had left an hour ago, and the log showed no one had badged in after hours. All the entries and exits were electronic, tracked by the system. If someone was in the building, there'd be a record. I radioed building management's after-hours line just to check if maybe someone was working late and I'd missed it. No one's scheduled to be in the building, the supervisor told me. You want me to check the badge log? Yeah, please. A minute later, last badge out was 11:47 p.m. No one's in there but you. I looked back at the monitor. The woman was gone. I felt a prickle of unease but pushed it down. Probably a glitch with the camera, I told myself. Old system, bound to have issues. But I couldn't shake the feeling. During my 2 a.m. patrol, I took the elevator to the 14th floor. The hallway was empty and silent. Office doors lined both sides, all locked. I checked each one, testing the handles. Everything was secure, nothing out of place. I went back to the security office and reviewed the footage from the 14th floor camera. I found the timestamp when I'd seen the woman, but when I watched it back, there was nothing there, just an empty hallway. I stared at the screen, confused. I'd seen her. I was absolutely certain, but the recording showed nothing. Just tired, I muttered to myself. Need more coffee. But 3 nights later, I saw her again. This time on the 19th floor. Same thing. Standing in the hallway, motionless, facing away from the camera. I immediately switched to the live feed, and there she was, just standing there. My heart rate picked up. I grabbed my radio and flashlight and headed for the elevators. The ride up to 19 felt longer than usual. The elevator dinged, doors opened, and I stepped out into darkness. The motion sensor lights flickered on as I moved down the hallway. Everything looked normal, empty, silent, no woman. I walked the entire floor, checking every corner, every office, every bathroom. Nothing. When I got back to the security office, I immediately reviewed the footage. Again, the recording showed nothing, an empty hallway. But I knew what I'd seen on the live feed. This didn't feel like a glitch anymore. This felt wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, I saw her 7 more times, always on different floors, always standing in hallways, facing away from the camera. And always, when I went to investigate, she'd be gone. The footage never captured her. I started to dread my shifts. I stopped doing the camera checks as frequently because I didn't want to see her. But that made things worse, because then I'd wonder if she was there, just out of sight, standing somewhere in the building while I sat in the office. I asked the day shift guards if they'd ever seen anything unusual. They all said no. I asked the cleaning crew. Nothing. I was starting to think I was losing my mind. Maybe the isolation was getting to me. Maybe I had some kind of stress disorder from my time in the service, and it was manifesting as hallucinations. Then one night, everything changed. It was 2:47 a.m., and I was forcing myself to do a camera check. I was cycling through feeds when I saw her on the 9th floor, but this time, she wasn't standing still. She was walking, slowly, deliberately, down the hallway toward the elevator. My entire body went cold. I watched the monitor, unable to look away. She reached the elevator, pressed the button. The elevator was going to bring her down, to the ground floor, to me. I felt a surge of panic. I didn't want to see her up close. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to leave, to get out of the building, but I couldn't move. I was frozen, watching the elevator indicator on the monitor. 9th floor, 8th, 7th. She was coming. My hands were shaking. I grabbed my flashlight like it was a weapon, even though I knew that was ridiculous. 6th floor, 5th, 4th. I could hear the elevator now, the mechanical hum of it descending. Third, second, ground floor. The elevator dinged, the doors opened, and there was nothing there. The elevator was empty. I stared at it, my breath coming in short gasps. The doors closed again, and the elevator went still. I immediately pulled up the footage. I had to know. On the recording, the 9th floor camera showed the hallway. Empty. No woman. But the elevator call button lit up on its own. The elevator doors opened. No one stepped inside. The elevator descended to the ground floor, for no reason, by itself. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. This wasn't a hallucination. The elevator had actually moved. That was real. But the woman, she wasn't on the cameras. She was never on the recordings, only on the live feeds, only when I was watching. I pulled out my phone and started searching. I needed to know if something had happened in this building, an accident, a death, something that would explain this. After an hour of digging through old news articles and public records, I found something. 5 years ago, a woman had died in this building. Her name was Rebecca Sutton. She'd worked on the 14th floor for a marketing firm. One night she'd stayed late to finish a project. Around midnight she'd had a medical emergency, a brain aneurysm, collapsed in the hallway. She was found the next morning by the cleaning crew, but she'd been dead for hours. She died alone, in an empty building, with no one there to help her. I felt sick reading it. The 14th floor. That's where I'd first seen the woman. I looked at the article's photo of Rebecca Sutton. I couldn't be sure, but the height, the build, it could have been her. I didn't know what to do with this information. I didn't believe in ghosts. I'd never been superstitious, but I couldn't explain what I was experiencing. The next night, I saw her again, 15th floor, just standing there, motionless. And this time, I did something different. I didn't go to investigate. Instead, I spoke, even though I felt insane doing it. "Rebecca," I said to the empty security office, "is that you?" Nothing happened. The woman on the monitor didn't move. "If you can hear me, I'm sorry you were alone. I'm sorry no one was here." I felt ridiculous, but I kept talking. "I don't know if you're trying to tell me something or if you just need someone to know you're still here, but I see you. I know you're here." On the monitor, the woman turned around. My breath caught. I couldn't see her face clearly on the grainy camera feed, but she was looking toward the camera now, toward me. And then she raised one hand, a small gesture, a wave, and she was gone. I sat there, stunned, staring at the empty hallway on the monitor. That was the last time I saw her. I worked at that building for another 6 months, and I never saw her again. No more figures in hallways. No more elevators moving on their own. Nothing. I don't know if what happened was real, or if I experienced some kind of shared trauma with a place that held a tragedy. I don't know if Rebecca Sutton was somehow reaching out, or if my mind created her from guilt and isolation and knowledge of her story. What I do know is this. For those few weeks, I felt like someone was trying to tell me they existed, that they mattered, that their death shouldn't be forgotten. And maybe that's all it was. A reminder that in these empty buildings we guard at night, there are stories. There are people who worked there, lived there, died there, and sometimes we're the only ones left to bear witness. I left that job eventually, got a day shift position at a different company. I don't work overnights anymore. I don't think I could, because sometimes, late at night when I'm alone, I still think about her, about Rebecca Sutton, dying alone in that hallway, with no one to help. No one to even know she was gone until morning. And I think about that wave, that small acknowledgement. I'd like to believe it meant something, that somehow my seeing her, my speaking to her, gave her some kind of peace. But I'll never really know. Some things remain mysteries, and maybe that's how they're meant to be. The night shift reveals a different world, one that most people never see, where isolation and darkness can amplify fear, where the smallest anomaly becomes magnified, where you learn to trust your instincts above all else. These three people experienced things that changed them, things that reminded them how vulnerable we are when we're alone, how the places we think are safe can harbor secrets, how sometimes the most frightening thing isn't what jumps out at you, but what lingers just out of sight, watching, waiting. If you have a true original story of your own, something that happened to you during a night shift, or any encounter with the unexplainable, we want to hear it. Your experience could be featured in a future Night Encounters video. Please email your story to nightencountersstories@gmail.com. Make sure your story is original, true, or allegedly true, and told from your own first-person perspective. Include as many sensory details as you can remember. We read every submission. Thank you for watching. Stay safe out there in the dark, and remember, trust your gut. It's trying to protect you.